right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into the Sports Card Therapist, where I give you a behind the scenes look at my hobby hustle and sprinkling some self care and wellness on top of that. I'm Rob Gerard, your Sports Card Therapist. And whether if you're listening to me on iTunes, Spotify, or watching on YouTube, welcome to the podcast. I am excited about today's episode 111. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that it is a round table discussion. This is the second roundtable discussion I've had of season 3. The first one I had was what is Hulk Hogan's most important card roundtable, which was great. But today, you know what? I'm taking it back to the roots. I'm taking it back to the essence. I've chatted with these guys on and off like a lot for the last year or so because we're all part of this big vintage card group chat that is on Instagram. And today we're going to be talking about vintage cards, and we're just going to have a roundtable discussion. We're going to be talking about this, that, and everything else. So Matthew, Adam, Steve, and Pete, welcome to the show, guys. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure being here, Rob. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So if we want to go around real quick and just kind of introduce ourselves and maybe give our Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, whatever handle we want, feel free. And we can go clockwise, starting with you, Matt.
All right, yeah. So my name is Matthew. I go by at 1956 Topps Guy on Instagram. That's really the only like social media thing I do. But I'm also Ignatius J. Riley on the Blowout forums and Net54. Been collecting collected cards when I was a kid. Up through about age 15 or 16. Then kind of got away. Then came back about when I was 25, and I really focused on vintage. It was 1956 Topps all the way. And so I've been collecting 1956 Topps and now, other vintage cards since about 2005.
Love it, love it, love it. And you know what? Randomly, it just so happens that I just picked up I just got it in the mail yesterday, a 56 Phil Rizzuto.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice
So
card.
let me
Very nice.
listen. I tell you, man, I love the 56 Topps. Love the fit. Love the look. Love that the action shot. And usually, anything that is horizontal, the picture, the set, usually it's like, people it's kind of frowned upon. But that 56, unbelievable, unbelievable. So you got a good name there, that's for sure.
Yep.
So Adam.
You guys didn't even realize it's like the perfect segue into my whole story. But I'm Adam on Instagram. I'm at Wise Guy Sports Cards, on Twitter at Wise Guy Cards, and then shamelessly plug www.wiseguysportscards.com is my website for everything that I have for sale. I started collecting cards when I was a kid. It was mainly the hometown cards. I'm from Pittsburgh, so it was Pirates, Steelers, Penguins, whatever I could get my hands on. I pretty much stopped collecting when I became a teenager, and then when I was 21, I was randomly scrolling through eBay. Don't even know what I was looking for, but I stumbled upon 1956 Topps. As odd as that is, but
that same thing, man, for me.
Bringing to the set, I think it was just the number of stars in the set, the design of the card. I love them, so I ended up buying and selling them that whole summer. Put them in a box. Didn't look at them for almost 10 years. I pulled this box out 4 years ago and was like, what am I going to do with these? Am I going to try to finish off the 56 Topps set, or am I going to try to sell them? What am I going to do? So I decided to try to finish off the Hall of Famers, and that spiraled into trying to build out the whole set. And now I collect everything when it comes to vintage cards. So it's pretty much my story.
I love it, man. I love it. I mean, talk about a segue, huh? Boy,
yeah.
that was perfect.
If I wouldn't have known any better, I thought you would have planned
it. All right. So Pete.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So I'm Pete. I go by Sports Cards Pete on Instagram. Mostly I collect pre-war baseball. So, Ruth, Ty Cobb. I'll do other vintage as well. I'll do some modern, mostly Jordan and Gretzky, but really my love has been on the vintage pre-war side. I've been collecting, for I would say 15 years. I've been on Net54 for forever. So one of the OG kind of vintage folks, even though I guess I'm the younger end of that cohort. So yeah, love the space and excited to be on and talk vintage cards.
Oh man, that is great, man. Thank you. And so for those that might not be sure, when you say pre-war, what are those years usually consist of?
I do it the wrong way, but I usually consider it Gowdy or earlier. Right. And so I think of like the Gowdy sessions back all the way to, 1800s. It's kind of like my pre-war era. I don't think it's the correct way of saying it, but usually it's, Cracker Jack, T206, some of the old judges up until Gowdy Ruths.
Okay, so up until 33 Gowdy.
Yeah, I think people do it even later than that, right? I think some people say like, okay, like 38 is kind of pre-war, but I think for my, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if the play balls fall into that. I don't know
Mhm,
exactly.
mhm.
I don't know the year that World War
I
II
don't know.
started. So I guess the definition.
Well,
But
we joined in 41, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the early play balls maybe, but yeah, a lot of people do consider the 38 Gowdies. as well.
I play it safe. I'm like, you know what? 33 sounds like a pre-war kind of
Mhm.
I agree.
timeline. So
Definitely. Does someone have a music playing in the background? Is that a recorder?
Actually, that's my wife teaching some flute, so I'll mute myself when I'm not speaking.
I'm like, is that a recorder? Is that what they call those? Like the little flutes, like from second grade?
Yeah, hot cross buns.
This
That's
was an
great.
actual flute, but yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's phenomenal. All right, and then Steve, we will get to you.
Yeah, boy, tough to follow that group. I'm Steve. I'm Vintage Slabman on IG. That's pretty much the only social that I have. Started collecting in around 84 when I was 9. And just was like, at that time I'd ripped modern packs, but I still just always loved vintage out of the gate. Everything I would read would be about vintage, and then like Baseball Digest and that type of stuff. They used to have the small ones in the mail. Um, Paid a lot of attention to current players then, but still collected both modern and vintage. Did a lot of autograph hunting because we had spring training out here and all that stuff. So we had great access to all the players, collected all the way up through college. Then I bought a house relatively young and made the mistake of getting too deep in that. So that put the collecting halt there, being house poor for a number of years, but still stayed active, but more behind the scenes. Didn't really do much eBay. Did a lot of old paper SCD buying and stuff back in the day there, but that's pretty much it. I've done everything from autographs to sports cards. That's pretty much my passion for vintage.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I guess I'll give a little summary on myself, even though I think most of my listeners have probably heard the story pieced together at some point. I started collecting when I was super young. Mom and dad divorced, and so I'd go with my dad on the weekends, and he loved his sports cards. So, we would go to card stores, he'd bring me to card shows, and I never got into opening wax. It was always about singles. So even now as an adult, when I came back into the hobby, so I've come back into the hobby, a bunch of times. So, I was in the hobby from probably like 86, because I was born in 82. So I was in the hobby from like probably like 86 to 96, and then, I discovered girls and all that, and everything else goes out the window. But so I jumped back in, but just put one toe in the water. I didn't really jump in. Probably about 2011, 2012 time frame, and kind of discovered eBay, and but what I was doing was I was going on eBay and buying up just like a lot of junk wax lots, because I loved Griffey and Joe Montana, Lawrence Taylor, like all the studs, all the Hall of Famers. So I was just buying up junk wax lots. So at this point in my life, I still hadn't really gotten into vintage. So my father passed away in 2013, and I always thought he loved Mickey Mantle, and I can remember him buying a Mickey Mantle card at the local card store, like when I was at some point in the 80s. And I can remember him being so proud of this Mickey Mantle card. And I don't think it was anything special. It was probably like a, 64, 65 something, and I can remember it had an ink stain on the back, and I think he paid like $80 for it. We didn't have much money. So, but he loved this thing. And so I could always remember kind of having Mickey Mantle on this pedestal, and that going along with getting the Beckett magazines in the mail every month, and seeing these iconic sports cards. I could just always remember seeing like the Bill Russell rookie and the Wilt Chamberlain rookie. I could always remember seeing these cards in Beckett and kind of holding them up like as like some kind of grail that I would never be able to acquire. So fast forward, I get back in the hobby right as the pandemic happens. I have no idea what planted the seed. Something must have, though, because you know, I mean, boredom could have been something I heard on the news. I don't know, but I went down the rabbit hole of consuming content podcasts because I love podcasts. I said there must be a sports card podcast out there, so I found two of them and started consuming the content, and then just jumped in fully, and really started to figure out a couple years ago that vintage is like my love when it comes to sports cards. You know, I mean, there's really not, modern just doesn't really do it for me, I guess. You know, I think there, and you guys can speak to this as well, I'm sure. You know, there's something that, you know, when you acquire a vintage card, you think about the journey that card has had and whose hands it's been passed through, and what those cards have meant to them, and just, you know, we're sitting here buying up cards that are 70, 80, 90 years old, 100 years old. It's unbelievable how old these cards are and some of the condition that, you know, some of these great cards are in. And Pete, you're talking about buying pre-war cards, right? I mean, think about how condition sensitive like those things are. You know, I don't think anyone ever really thought that these Gaudi cards would be worth anything, or these T206s.
No,
Feel
the
free to
card,
jump in. Yeah, guys, feel
the
free to jump in. The
the
water's
the
warm.
the card stock on the Gaudis is so thin. I mean, it's amazing that they survive at all. You know,
Yeah, or
It's
even the Cracker Jacks, even worse,
Oh
right?
yeah, it's
totally, totally.
ridiculous.
You, you know what makes me laugh so much though is when you compare like vintage collectors versus modern. The modern collectors are fighting over, is this a 9? Is it a 9.5? Is
Hmm.
it an 8.5? When us vintage collectors are like, oh, it's a 2, it's a 1, it's an A, it's a 1.5. Like we
Hmm.
don't care. And I think that's a huge difference between vintage collectors is that the card stocks for our issuances are usually terrible. The 50s get better, but I think for us, we're just kind of like appreciative of whatever the card is because we just love the card versus worrying so much about the grade.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's
100%.
when I actually had.
100%.
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, 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 I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I had this awful like kind of tragedy that happened to me one time when I bought like a T206 red Cobb off of eBay PSA 3 that was gorgeous. The person shipped it and like FedEx like totally bungled it, and the card actually the slab cracked right down the long ways. And like the whole time I was bummed that it was like my Cobb that is now gone and I had to get refunded, but I was more bummed by the fact that this card literally survived a century, like in people's pockets, in freaking cabinets and stuff. It made it all the way to 2021, and then FedEx totally botched it. It was brutal. Like it's like we're stewards for these like artifacts, right? And that just killed me.
Totally. We're like little caretakers in that moment in time for that little, that's the romance of it, is the journey, and just to kind of let your mind wander on what was the progression of this card up to the point that you were lucky enough to be able to have it in your collection for a while.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because you look at the modern cards and you have serial number cards. And I know Rob, I've heard you talk about this before, where a lot of people will consider if it's numbered out of 5, out of 10, whatever, that may be rare, right? But in a way, it's more of false scarcity, manufacturer scarcity, whatever you want to call it, right? The fact that some of these pre-war cards have literally survived 100 years, I mean, some as much as 125 years, that's rare. I mean, the fact that those cards essentially been able to survive for that long, the population's so low just because that's what survived. I mean, to imagine somebody taking care of these little pieces of cardboard for that long. I mean, even before there was grading companies, things like that. I mean, some of these cards literally were taken care of in old cigar boxes or whatever it was for 80, 90 years. I mean, it's phenomenal to really think about the history and their journey.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and you've touched on this before, Rob, right, is that like the pop report is just a fraction of the story when it comes to vintage cards. Because if you're looking at like, A's, ones, twos, like there's huge differences in what those cards actually look like, right? When you see the images. So like I pay attention to the pop report kind of, but it's only a very small part of the story, right? It's all about the eye appeal.
And you know what? It's funny that you say that, Matt, because Matthew, sorry.
Either way, it's
I
fine.
don't think I've ever gone to the pop report on a card. I don't think I've ever gotten a card and then like a vintage card, flipped it over and then saw what the population was on it. Now that I think about it, I mean, maybe
I
very rarely have I ever done that with that kind of card. But I think when it comes to these modern cards, like that's literally one of the selling points. It's almost like I feel like sometimes these modern cards, there's like not that much appeal to them, so you almost have to find these ways to like sell it to someone. So you're like, this is only a pop 11, this is only a pop 4, where it's like you see one of these vintage cards and you get them in your hand and you just fall in love with it. You don't have to sell me on anything. Like I'll take it, you know. I don't even care what the pop is on it. And you know, newsflash, most of them are pretty low, but still.
Yeah, I mean, and I would argue that higher profile vintage cards, the pop reports are likely not even close to being accurate, because so many times people have tried to crack them and resub them raw, and those old certs don't get canceled out.
Yep.
So who knows how many times that's happened on, like, let's say 56 Mantle. If you look at the pop, I think it's like over 6,000, but you know, there's less of those than that floating around in circulation. And so, and I don't think it's as relevant anyways, because of so many private collections where once they go in there, they're not coming back out onto
I,
the market for a resale side.
And
I
I love that you brought up that 56 tops mantle, because I mean, there's, you know, I think when someone that's not too sure about, like, you know, if they don't have the true finger on the pulse as to like which cards are valued at what and why a 52 Jackie Robinson might be more expensive than a 49 Robinson, right? Like, so this 56 tops that you're talking about here, first of all, that was his Triple Crown year, right? His Triple Crown year. And it was a gorgeous action shot picture of him jumping up and catching a ball. And I think it's been pretty, you know, it's been researched and they found the exact picture, the exact game. They know, like, so you compare the two and you see them, you're like, oh yeah, there's the play right there, you know. And then also when it comes to tops, he didn't have a 54 or a 55 tops because he had an exclusive deal with Bowman. So there's all this kind of, I think, mystique around the 56 tops mantle. You know, and I mean, you see some of these, you know, lower grade ones, and it's like, you know, it's like one of those things where people say, like, I know what I have, you know. But when it comes to vintage guys know what they have. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's like diamond hands. Like these vintage guys, like, it doesn't matter if the market's up, if the market's down, if it's wherever it is, for the most part, these you know, gorgeous vintage cards don't come available that often.
mhm. You know, what I've noticed is, let's just say there's a vintage card, the pop 100, and then there's a modern card. And by the way, I collect modern too, so like I'm
I do too.
biased. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, I like modern. I mean, some if it's fun, but you look at a modern card with serial number to 100 versus a vintage card that has 100 pop. The churn on the modern, I would say, is probably multiples higher than the churn on a vintage card. And Rob, you mentioned the whole diamond hands thing. I mean, the population almost doesn't matter, because it's like how much of these cards actually, like how much frequently are they going up to auction. And these modern cards, like the same cards are up auction all over, you know, every auction. These vintage people, like, we hold it so hard. So even the pop reports are misleading, because the fact that not many of us, a lot of these are buy and hold for many, many years. So I think even the pop report's misleading for us.
So yeah, totally. I totally agree. Also, there's only so much of that popular pop report in circulation, period, like on eBay or anywhere. Might, if it maybe 10%, let's say, or whatever you want to theorize.
Yeah, it's funny that the whole conversation that Pete just brought up. It spurred this whole FOMO moment, to where it's like, just because these cards rarely come up, it's like when you actually see one that you really want, sometimes you need to jump on it. Like sometimes you need to pay more than you really want to it, because who knows when that card's going to come back up again.
Yeah, if you see one that pops up and like that appeals to your eye, you
Yeah.
just have to jump on it. And you have
Totally.
to kind of like take the market as a general suggestion. You got to be aggressive.
I was told, when you're talking about that FOMO moment and paying more sometimes, years ago, when I probably one of the first few card shows I ever attended, there was a, like, guy seemed 100 years old to me, a dealer there, and I was a little kid and talking to him, and I was trying to haggle with him on the price on a card he had, and I said, well, I think I'm paying too much for it at this price. And he said, you never pay too much, you're just paying early when it comes to vintage. So,
That's funny.
He turned out being right, actually.
Yeah, the other thing I'll say to that point is that I've regretted far more buys where I like really tried to like hit like a price point than the buys where I kind of extended myself because I really saw the example that I wanted, right? I always end up having to like resell those examples where I'm like, yeah, I was really trying to save money on this instead of really focusing on the one that really struck out to me.
Yeah, and I think like
Totally.
it becomes a point where maybe that's maturing as a collector. When
Mm,
you start early on, it's you want to buy things at a competitive price. You want to pay a good price for certain things. But then when you end up doing that, a
mhm.
lot of times you end up buying, I don't know, mediocre IPL cards that you may not like or you may end up wanting to get rid of down the line. But you rarely make that mistake with a strong IPL card. So, sort of as you mature, you realize that a lot of times it is worth paying up for something that looks really nice that you really want.
Yeah, and I tell you, just to piggyback off what you guys are saying, I think like probably some of us, a 52 Maze is definitely one of my grails, right? It's like one of these cards that just super high on the list. Like it's been on my top 5 forever. So I'm watching a heritage auction a few months back, and I end up pulling the trigger on one. I gave a high bid. I ended up getting it. I was super happy with it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting a 52 Tops Maze. This is amazing, and I get it, and it comes, and I couldn't take my mind off of how off-centered it was. And I was like, "Ugh." It's like, okay, I got the card. This is off center though. And it was an SGC 3. And the thing is, and this is like, man, when it comes to these modern cards, let me just say, I almost feel like it's almost like I don't know, like some kind of language for dummies. Like, if it says it's a 10, it's probably a 10, right? If it says it's 9.5, it's probably 9.5. But an SGC 3 versus what maybe a PSA 3 with a qualifier of OC off center might be, is something completely different, right? So it's like not all grades are the same. And I love having that conversation. And Adam, you just brought up a great point about, I think as you mature in this space, you realize that how much eye appeal really matters. I mean, rounded corners are fine for most vintage guys if it's centered and the registration looks nice, but try telling that to a modern collector, so this off-centered maze, I waited so long to get a 52 Tops Maze, and I ended up moving it like a month later because I didn't even want to look at it. I was so upset with myself, as crazy as that sounds. I was so upset with myself. I moved it for something bigger, which is actually one of the cards I brought with me, but which is off-centered as well, but that's a different story. So but yeah,
You bring up something that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, was all the focus on centering and stuff now, because originally back in the 80s when I was collecting a lot of vintage stuff, centering wasn't as important because most of the guys' viewpoints, and I think Rick with Probstein had talked about this too at one point, about that's how it came out of the pack, so the guys really had the emphasis on, if you have one with sharp corners that's off centered, clean surface, well, technically that was a better handled card than one with rounded corners or creases that was centered. So it's interesting how the dynamic has changed a lot. I still I always try to go for the best centered I can, but I make concessions on some sets like the 52 Tops and some of those where they're just so horribly centered, like notoriously.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I think the way that I would look at it is like you want think about when you have like one of these like Zion cases or whatever, right? When you crack that thing open, you want to open it and be like, "Holy smokes. Like look what's in here," right? You should be excited by your card. And the thing that you look at when you open that case, you don't look at the grade. You look at the card,
mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's a
so
great point.
it's like your maze, right? If you don't want to look at it, that's not the right card. But the thing that you're looking at isn't the grade. You're looking at the card,
Yeah.
right? That's the thing that matters.
It's so hard for a lot of people to get past that. I mean, I went back and forth. This was a couple months ago. I acquired a green cob and it was a 3, and I had just gotten rid of a 4.5. And my friend basically had to sit me down and said, "Listen, if you took both of these cards and you took them out of the slab, which one would you want? And I mean, it put it in such a perspective to where it was like, I don't care that it's a lower grade. This card looks way better. But it's become, I don't know if it's just the monetization of the grades or what exactly it is, that it's hard for people to get past that mindset. They want the higher grade, regardless if the grade that's too low or looks way better.
Yeah, I think that's changing from like us diehard collector standpoints, where we've been, some of us, if we're working on a particular budget on a guy or a card that you're wanting, you've been forced into the lower grades, but then you've also got higher eye appeal on a lot of those. And for me personally, if I've ever had to get rid of those, many times I end up realizing the higher grade value almost. Like a super sharp 2, I might get a 3 or a 3.5 value out of it versus just getting a lower eye appeal 4.
I think one of the biggest cheat codes, and people realize this, but the T206 is with the back damage, right? So if you're not a back collector and there's some paper loss, you're looking at most a 2, but probably a 1.5. So you could have a 1.5 where the front looks like a 7 or a 6, and you're paying a fraction. I just never understood why that was the case. And like obviously they'll go for premium over other 1.5s. I wonder if some people are just looking at comps and they're saying, okay, here's where the rest of the 2 sell for. Let me just give it a little bit of premium, and that's that. But it's like, for me, it's like it just seems the wrong way, because to Adam's point, you're looking at like these 2 different cards, and if one's 1.5 looks like a 7, one looks like a 3, and it's a 5. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And you would think people would come around to that, and they do, but not as much as you would expect. It just, like, we're so ingrained at looking at the grades. It just doesn't make sense.
I mean, that's part of
Yeah.
the thing that makes vintage fun, I think, right? Is kind of like I spent a lot of time with, like, I've already got this card, but there's this one little thing that kind of bugs me about it, and I'm just waiting to find the card that has the right eye appeal. Like, I had a 55 Jackie Robinson in a PSA 5, and Adam posted one that was a PSA 6, I think, on Facebook, and I was like, that just looks amazing. It just jumped at me, right? And so in that case, it was really like upgrade to upgrade, but a lot of times it's downgrade to upgrade.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you guys had said it. It's to me, it's all, we're like really collecting emotion outside of the value side of things. So it's all about that feeling when you pick it up. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, the cards still stir that initial feeling of when I first look at them. Even if I've looked at them 1,000 times, it's just like a hardwired. It's like the best adrenaline. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what Rob was saying at the beginning, at least for me, is like when I came back to vintage cards, it was kind of like Adam. Like, my wife asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna look at eBay, and then I'm like, oh, baseball cards. Yeah, I used to do this, and then I was like, wait, I can get like a really nice looking 56 Ernie Banks for like $100. That seems insane to me. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of where it started. Was kind of like, yeah, there's like this impressive piece of history that I can remember being a kid at a show, and like, I've got my Jose Canseco, and I'm looking in the case, and there's like, Mickey Mantle and like the heroes of like my father, right? And it's that feeling that you want. Like, I own this piece of history now. It's really cool.
Yeah, totally.
And I've always said, for me, I know the foundation of my collecting is nostalgia. And so nostalgia is just such a strong driving force, I think, just in human nature in general. But just because I wasn't born when a lot of these players were playing, or when these cards were printed, it's still nostalgia for me. Just like Matthew was saying, I could remember going to card shows or going to a card store and looking through the glass and seeing those cards. I can remember my father talking about going to see Mickey Mantle. So when I get a Mickey Mantle, for me, that brings up feelings of my relationship with my father. And that's, for me, and I just get the chills as I say that. I could feel like a little tingling in my nose as I'm talking and saying that, but there aren't many things other than cardboard that can actually do that.
Yeah, what a gift.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's like the Ruth that's on your shelf there, right? It's like like my great grandparents were the ones that are like cheering this guy on, right? And I'm holding this memento that was in a pack of gum from 1933 with like the image of like one of the most famous athletes in the history of the world. I mean, that's just crazy to me. And actually, that's why I actually find that like a Gaudi Babe Ruth is like incredibly inexpensive compared to modern cards for what it is, like what the history of it is. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah, that I you're hitting all these points that I was thinking in my mind too, because you see the money that's been tossed around in modern, and then you see this stuff on vintage, and from a lot of our perspectives, vintage has gone up a lot, but it hasn't gone up anything comparatively speaking to the multiples of modern. I mean, if you're talking about stepping into a Ruth for $10,000 or $12,000 for a nice eye appeal Ruth, like that's comparatively speaking to what the modern stuff's bringing, that's like pennies in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and listen, I'm going to jump in real quick, guys, because I mean, this conversation is incredible, and I feel like we could talk forever about this, but I know that before we came on, I asked you guys how you felt about bringing with you or just discussing briefly, and then we could go into a bigger discussion after we all show or talk about what cards we wanted. But to talk about which one or two vintage cards that you own mean the most to you, and not that it's about the value of it, not that it's about the price tag, because it's for me everything that we're talking about, right? We've barely talked about value when it comes to these cards, right? We're talking more about why they're important pieces of history and the feelings they bring up, right? So it doesn't matter if it's um a Babe Ruth or a Phil Rizzuto, right? So, but I can't wait to see what cards you guys brought and what cards you guys want to discuss, because none of us know, none of us shared with each other what we were going to bring. So Vintage Slab Man, do you want to kick this off, Steve?
Sure. Can I do a combo with two cards and then one other card?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
This
All
is
right.
your
It's
world.
so let me see, where's my camera here? Can you see? Let's see. Hold on. I'm trying to figure this out.
Oh, I know what that is.
58 Mantle All-Star.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And then 58 Pee Wee Reese. That's my mask.
Awesome.
My mask moment. I feel like Eric Stoltz with the 58 Pee Wee Reese. If anybody remembers that movie, but
Classic movie, by the way. Classic movie with Cher and Sam Elliott. Classic.
Love it. Love it.
so those two cards were my first two that I ever got. My collection, most of my childhood collection got stolen, like my senior year of high school. And fortunately, these were off in a different area of the house. They didn't get them. So I still have them raw. I'll never grade them, just how I got them back in the day. The 58 Mantle All-Star is my favorite card. It's like, just when I think of Mantle, I think of that card for whatever reason. And I just loved reading about the Brooklyn Dodgers. And then my other card, see if I can show you this one. 66 Catfish Hunter. So this one was more sentimental. This was like my buddy's card, and we used to have these epic trade battles where I would throw like everything in the kitchen sink at him, and he would shoot down my offers and never trade me this catfish. And it was like the card I wanted so bad. That probably went on for like 3 years, all the way till he moved away in 7th grade. And then fast forward about a year and a half ago, I get a letter in the mail from him, and there's the Catfish Hunter card. And he just said, "Hey, remember this one? We used to have these epic trade battles," and he had sent it over to me. So that one's a keeper forever as well.
I love it, man. And the irony in it is your Instagram handle is Vintage Slab Man, and you showed all raw cards.
I know. You got to have some that keep you back at your roots,
I love it, man. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. Pete, you're up.
Sure. Yeah. So the first one is a 1907 Deech Fielding Ty Cobb rookie postcard.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I mean, this is literally, I love postcards because the population is so rare, right? For some of them, especially the Cobbs. Cobb didn't really have a rookie. Some people say it's his W600, which is like the premium card. Others say it's the 1907 postcard. So the Deech Fielding, the Wolverine, there's a seamless and a Wolverine batting. But the Fielding one's my favorite. And so this
Can you
one,
put that a little closer to the camera so we can
yeah,
oh,
yes,
look at
that's
that
Cobb in
thing.
a fielding pose. Yeah. So
That is in
That's
beautiful
awesome.
condition too. Oh my
yeah, for a 3, it's not bad. You know, I was trying to get one for a while, and they don't really pop up, and they go for a ton of money. And so, I sold some cards to have some cash, assuming I get one eventually. And I got one early last year, and it's been one of my favorite cards ever since. Just knowing that how long it took me to get it, one of my favorite players collecting, and how much I love postcards. So that's one of them. And then the other one, as a Yankee fan, and Rob, I know the game's on right now, so I'm trying to
it
have to watch
is.
it.
It is.
But the other one is Babe Ruth. So it's one of his earliest. It's a Felix Mendelssohn. So from 1917, 1920. So this is a 1 grade because there's a little pencil on the bottom. But again, I don't notice it. It looks better for me, and I could give 2 whatever what the grade is or not. It's actually funny because he was traded while these things were issued. So it's actually him in a Red Sox uniform, but
What?
has it as a New York Yankees card. So 2 of my favorites. Again, like the grade matters less. It's the eye appeal, and they're some of my favorites. And it just like knowing when I got these cards and how excited I was is what the hobby's all about. Whether it's a dollar card or whatever it is, it's just like knowing these cards are never leave my collection. It's just awesome.
So you didn't get it in the mail and immediately try to calculate how much you'd be able to flip it for once the baseball season started again?
I'm like, yeah, how do I prospect Babe Ruth? I know he's dead. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's more footage of him hitting more home runs. I don't know.
No.
There just might be a little bit of upside on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm kidding because I definitely like a couple of us said, some of us collect modern as well, and I never want to make an argument for vintage by crapping on modern. So it's like I'm not trying to do that at all. Like there's no need to crap on modern. Vintage can definitely hold its own. So but yeah, man, awesome cards. And the thing is with both of those cards are those were oversized cards, right? So they're not the average, whatever it is, 3.5 or whatever it is. So it's almost like the star cards, right? With the Jordan of the mid 80s, the star cards can be oversized. So some people kind of stay away from collecting those, but that doesn't really bring down the value from what you're saying with I mean, a 1917 Babe Ruth and a, what was it, 1907 Ty
Ni-
Cobb?
1907. Yeah, the one argument you can make is they weren't pulled out of packs. Fine, make that argument. I still want the card. So the other argument is they don't fit in most card holders, which
Yeah.
is frustrating. But I mean, you gotta figure a way
Well,
out, right?
yeah. No, but that's amazing though, man. Oh, those are beautiful. All right, Adam, I'm excited to see what you have, man.
I'm excited to show you. One thing I was going to say about Pete's postcards is I haven't gotten into the postcards yet, but I love the postcards. I love the exhibits from the 20s. And recently, I've really had an appreciation for Type 1 photos.
Oh, okay.
Talk about like the uniqueness of just cards you don't see. The Type 1 photos, I mean, you may literally acquire one that is a 1-of-1. It is the only one out there, and it's a fabulous display piece. So I think that's one thing that's really good about those postcards in the exhibit is they're great display pieces. I mean, you can put them out, you can appreciate them, you can look at them every day. So that's one thing that's really cool about them. Okay, so piggybacking off the Ty Cobb cards, since I am a big Ty Cobb collector, I'm not trying to break the rules here, but I have a couple combos. So the first 2 cards I have here are a 1914 and a 1915 Cracker Jack card.
Oh man, insane.
So
Killing me,
I'll
man.
hold up.
Killing me.
This is the 14 here.
Those are sick.
Oh my
In my
god.
opinion, honestly, this is the most iconic card of all time. It's my favorite card of all time. I just think
Yeah.
it's an absolutely beautiful card. The Cracker Jacks are tough, especially the 14s. There just aren't a lot of them out there. I mean, you may see 3 or 4 Cobbs pop up a year, but they're just so fragile. I mean, you can even see this 14. It has a piece of the corner out here, because basically the whole 14 issue came in the Cracker Jack boxes. They came in this little envelope. So you got kids trying to rip them out. They're basically ripping off corners and whatever the case might be, to get them out. So that's actually a pretty common flaw that you see with those. But I think it's an
I've never even seen one of those Ty Cobbs in person before. I mean, I think about all the shows I've been to over the years. I don't think I've ever seen one in person.
You don't see too many. I think I saw one at the National. I picked it up and I looked at the price tag on the back and I was like, here you go, sir. And then my other combo that I have here with Cobb are 3 T2S6s. So I'm going to show you guys one. So here's the green portrait. Here's the red portrait. And then here is also a red portrait. But if you notice, it has a yellow orangish background.
Yeah.
Card that is missing one of the red ink passes on the back. So basically it has a yellow or orangish background. It's very unique. I've never seen one with this particular type color. So I guess in my respect, this is a 1-of-1 Ty Cobb. I know there's a few orange ones out there, but with that particular type shade, it's really cool. So speaking about cards to where I knew one would probably never pop up again and I needed to pay up for it, that was a perfect example of that.
Wow. Unbelievable. Well, Matthew, good luck following that up.
Oh man, this is tough. Yeah. So I definitely went the route of not most expensive card, but I wouldn't be the 1956 Topps guy if I didn't have a 1956 Topps card. So this is Jackie Robinson's 1956 Topps card. This is his last card, right? His last regular issued card. A couple things that I like about it are that there's the action image has him sliding into home. You can see the hitter is still at the plate. So at least to me, it kind of conjures these images of like Jackie Robinson stealing home, which is like one of like the classic things I think about. Like that guy, that guy's such a classic American hero, and I think that's such a bold move to make in a game, right? Steal home. So
wow.
So that's one card.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. We can't just fly past this point that you just made because that is wow. That's like taking this conversation to a different level here. So perfect. I mean, I love the way you said that. I mean, the batter's still standing at home. So, I mean, how often do you see anyone stealing home nowadays, right? I mean, I can't even think of the last time I saw someone stealing home, but what you're saying is you're really kind of correlating that with the social justice and everything that he went through as a baseball player as on a human level.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he's such an iconic guy. You walk into the Hall of Fame, there's 3 statues that you see, right? It's Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, and Lou Gehrig, right? Those are not just like American baseball heroes, but those are like icons of people, right? Those are all aspirational people. And I think at least with Jackie Robinson, I mean, it's his last card. So in some sense, it's kind of inexpensive compared to some of his other cards, but the colors on it and the image and like what it represents, it's so cool. And then on the back, there's, a bunch of cartoons, which is, common in 1956 cards. But, one of the cartoons it says in the rightmost one, it says his fine playing helped Brooklyn win the 55 series. And what you see is an image of like Jackie in the middle surrounded by like white baseball players that are all cheering him on. Right. So that's a huge moment. That's a really big deal. And it's so that's a case of, it's not just the front of the card that really strikes a lot of chords with me, but also the back.
It's interesting what you said about the stealing home part too, because if you think about it, I never looked at it from that angle, but if you think about it, when he stole home in the World Series against the Yankees, if he would have failed and he would have been out, how magnified would that have been? Versus he actually pulled it off and did it. I mean, huge pressure.
So that's the first one. Here's the second one. The second one is 1934 Gaudi Lou Gehrig number 37. So, a lot of people get fixated on rookie cards, right? Because they're like, that's the ones that you often think of. And, you can argue which Lou Gehrig is his rookie card, but in my mind, this is the best Lou Gehrig card. It's got a beautiful image on the front. He's smiling, it's got that bright yellow background. And I think for me, the other thing that kind of takes this card to the next level is what's on the back. So what's on the back, it reads a quote from him, which is, "I love the game of baseball and hope to be in there batting them out for many years to come. Fortune has been kind to me and my record is as follows." And that's a really big deal, right? Because he's talking about how lucky he is and how excited he is to keep playing baseball. And of course, like we all know, like the tragic story of him getting Lou Gehrig's disease only, and stopping playing only a few years, like 4 years after this card came out. So at this card comes out, he's like the king of baseball, right? And in just a few short years, that gets taken away from him. And in some sense, people think of him as, very misfortunate, having, his life taken away at the age of 37. But, if you read the story of his life and how he grew up like super poor in New York and, and ended up becoming this hero that we all know his name today because of his association with the disease. But there's just a lot of things I think about when I look at this card, and it's just amazing to me. So that's why I chose it.
Wow. Unbelievable. Man, you guys, you guys really knocked it out the park with those. And, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can actually see, I'm going to show 2 cards. I'll just do a quick combo. You can see them behind me. So here they are. They are the 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle, true rookie, and the 1933 Gowdy, the redback, number 149. And so with these cards, there's so much I could say. I talked a little bit about, Mickey Mantle, what he meant to my father, and obviously they're both Yankees. I'm a born and raised, diehard Yankee fan, pinstripes through and through. And so when I got back into the hobby a couple years ago, I started, at the top of my PC pyramid, was Mickey Mantle. And when I started collecting, and just started accumulating a lot of Mickey Mantles, and I realized, like, okay, like, even though I know the direction I'm going, I kind of felt like I was just kind of haphazardly collecting Mickey Mantle cards. I was, if I saw one, there was no actual direction. So I said, okay, the 52 tops, that's kind of out of my price range at the moment, but the 51 Bowman, which is the true rookie, there was something about that, and I said, what, I'm going to make that my goal. So when I was finally able to acquire a copy, it just said so much to me, like it really changed the way I looked at collecting when I was able to acquire the 51 Bowman. And, it said, okay, you know what, this is turning into more in the hobby. This feels almost like an investment, and that's when I was starting to realize, like, okay, I feel like kind of like a hybrid. I'm a collector, but I'm also, not carelessly just spending money now. I'm trying to be a little bit more focused. I'm trying to be careful with my money. So setting that goal for me was huge because I accomplished it. And I actually ended up moving my first 51 Bowman Mickey Mantle only because I had my mind set on a bigger card, which is the LeBron right there, if you could see it. So I actually moved the 51 Bowman in a deal to acquire the LeBron, and I lost sleep over acquiring it, or over moving the Mickey Mantle. It was like that one card that I lost. And long story short, after I got that Willie Mays that was off center that I couldn't get out of my head, this card walked up to my table a few months back at a show, and I said to myself, this guy doesn't know it, but he is not leaving with that card. He is not leaving with that card. I'm getting that card. I don't care if I have to overpay for it. I don't care how much I have to overpay for it. I'm getting that card. And even though this is off-centered as well, it's actually a PSA 4 with the qualifier OC. It's definitely a better version. Like, my first one was miscut or off centered, I don't know, to the point where you could start to see the other card coming through on the side. Plus, there was a massive print line going right down the bottom. And, I was constantly saying to people, that's not a crease, that's a print line. That's not a crease, that's a print line. I was like almost kind of, insecure about it. But so that and then this completely different story. This just I've had this probably about a year now, and it just the opportunity came up to maybe move up into it, and in a split second I said I'm going after that thing, and I paid a high value for it. I paid over comps, and that's fine though, because it's you know nearly perfectly centered. And the thing is, it's a really it's a 2, but it's a strong 2. So
Yeah,
I feel
Hey,
that's
very
Rob.
got beautiful eye appeal for the
yeah,
grade.
thank you. So I just feel really good about it, So it's like the 51 Bowman mantle. It's like I was hyper focused on it, and I set this big goal that I felt like was a big goal, and I accomplished it. And then on the flip side, the Ruth literally was presented to me, and I reacted and got it. And now they're 2 of my absolute favorite cards.
Rob, do you know why? Not that grades matter because we're vintage folks, but do you know why that Ruth got a 2?
You know what? I don't. The only thing that there is there's a slight divot in the forehead, right on his forehead. I don't know if you can see it when I hold it up
Yeah,
right there. But other than that, I mean, there's no paper loss, there's no stain, there's no nothing. I mean,
it's
I've
wild.
had people say like, "Oh, you should, you know, submit it somewhere else or even just crack it." And I'm like, it's staying in my PC. I don't
Yeah.
care,
So,
but yeah, it's
It's the boldness of the red on that that sets
mhm,
it off.
that's a
yeah,
great point.
yeah, definitely.
White,
And
white borders. The borders look beautiful. I mean, that's a huge thing.
yeah,
Ours are super sensitive, but yeah, it's funny you say that. I have the yellow one in a 3 that has a small indentation, something similar to basically what you have, and
wow.
it's those type technical grades that are like the greatest thing in the world to us. One
Absolutely.
about like Pete was mentioned the T206s earlier with a little bit of paper loss on the back that have like a 1.5 or 2. Those are the best kind. I mean, to be truthful, I'm not looking at the back of a T206, so why should I care if it has a tiny amount of paper loss? As long as the front looks great and vivid, that's all I want.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because on one hand I'm like, why does it have to have that divot on the forehead, or why on the back does it have to have that paper loss? It's like, well, if it didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to afford it, probably, that
Yeah.
you wouldn't have gotten it. So it's like you should be grateful that it's got that paper loss on the back, because now it's yours. It
Especially,
would have been more than double the value if it didn't have that paper loss. So
especially on the T206s, is since there's no stats or anything, if it's minor paper loss and doesn't really
Yeah.
take away from the aesthetics, I mean, you're very rarely flipping it over and looking at it.
What do you guys think about pinholes, right? Because that's another technical 1 or 1.5 grade, right? But usually the pinholes are so freaking tiny that some of the Cracker Jacks will have them, some T26s, or the T3s will have them. Pinholes to me are another cheat code because sometimes you barely notice them.
Yeah,
And it knocks the technical area down so much, and you're getting a great card for a great price. But some people are against them, especially if the holes are a little bit bigger. But for me, that's another reason to go buy a card.
totally. Yeah, I've got a 56 maze, and I still have to study the heck out of it to find the pinhole. It's like right in the darkest part of the card, and it barely goes through in the back. It's just like you take those when you can find them.
Yeah, I can tell you that if a 1914 Cracker Jack Ty Cobb or shoeless came up that had like a nice pinhole right in his head, I'd still be all over that thing, man.
100%.
Totally.
you wouldn't throw it out of bed if you woke up next to it in the morning?
No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
I literally
Well,
wake up
listen.
with my Cracker Jack next to me every morning.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Oh man, well guys, listen, this has been a great conversation. It's been incredible. I mean, we're coming up on an hour already, and I just want to thank you guys for your time. This has been a blast. I love talking vintage. I know you guys do too. We're all in this vintage group chat, and it's like I learn so much from just watching the conversation happen. I don't even need to jump in. But what's really cool though is you know, becoming familiar with who you guys are, you know, just through, you know, just by name, and the fact now that, you know, we're all on a you know, a call together, and we're here, we are doing the show. It's like now I could truly put a face to the name, and I mean, just so much knowledge, you know, that I'm looking at right now on the screen, man. I'm just in awe of it. So I just want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and it's
Oh,
been
thank
great.
you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's better than
definitely.
talking about cards, man? Especially these classics, right? It's
Jack,
awesome.
this episode's
So
going for
fun.
3 hours. Thank you.
Yeah, really. I thought we were just doing an intermission here. I thought we were going to keep going.
Oh yeah, guys. Well, listen. So once again, Matthew, do you want to give your Instagram if anyone wants to reach out to you?
Yeah, happy to, chat over DM anytime. I'm at 1956 Tops Guy.
All right, and Adam.
Yep. Adam at Wise Guy Sports Cards on Instagram.
Love it. Pete.
Yeah, so Pete at Sports Card Pete.
All right, and Steve.
Yep, Steve at Vintage Slab Man.
All right. Well, guys, once again, thank you so much for coming on. It was great having you on, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Yep, right. Same here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.